What did you miss when a woman is betrayed by her fiancé, abandoned in the middle of a stormy night, and forced to call the most dangerous man in the city? She hates him, but he arrives in 17 minutes, and from that moment, nothing ever goes back to how it was. This is the story of Harper Vale, a woman who steps into the darkness to find herself. Watch until the end, hit like, and comment with the name of the city you're watching in so I know how far the story has progressed. The rain didn't fall on Blackwater City that night. It attacked. Sheets of water hammered the pavement like fists, flooding the gutters, turning the sidewalks into shallow rivers that swallowed the curbs whole. The streetlights along East Harbor Boulevard had gone out 2 blocks back, and the one still working threw sick yellow circles onto the ground that the storm swallowed every few seconds. Harper Vale stood beneath the overhang of East Harbor Station with her left shoe full of blood. She didn't know when the cut happened. Somewhere between running out of the apartment and tripping on the broken curb near 7th Street. The gash ran diagonally across her shin, deep enough that she could see pink tissue through the split skin when the lightning flashed. She'd pressed her scarf against it for a while, but the scarf was soaked now, heavy and useless, and the bleeding hadn't stopped. Her hands were shaking, not just from the cold. The station was closed, iron gates pulled across the entrance, padlocked with a chain thick enough to tow a car. A printed notice taped to the gate said something about construction, weekend closures, alternative routes. She couldn't read the whole thing because the rain had smeared the ink and her vision kept blurring at the edges. She checked her phone again. 4% battery. The screen was cracked from when she'd dropped it running down the stairs of the apartment she used to share with Trevor Kane. The apartment that was supposed to be theirs. The apartment where she'd walked in 2 hours ago expecting to find him asleep and instead found closets emptied, drawers pulled open, her laptop wiped, and a joint bank account balance of $0.00 on a statement he'd left on the kitchen counter like a receipt. No note, no explanation, just absence. She'd called him 9 times, straight to voicemail. She'd called her friend Margot, who didn't answer, called her old college roommate Diana, whose number was apparently disconnected, called the one cousin she still talked to, who picked up on the 6th ring and said, "Harper, it's almost 1 in the morning, I can't." And then the call dropped. 3% battery now. Harper lowered herself onto the wet concrete step beneath the overhang and pulled her knees to her chest. The rain misted sideways and hit her face. Her teeth were chattering so hard she could feel it in her jaw joints. The cut on her shin throbbed with every heartbeat, steady and mean. She scrolled through her contacts with a wet thumb, past the names of people she hadn't spoken to in months, past therapist colleagues, past the landlord, the dentist, the dry cleaner. Her thumb stopped on a name she hadn't looked at in over a year. Damian Moretti. She stared at it. The letters on the cracked screen seemed to pulse with each flicker of distant lightning. She knew what he was. Everyone in Blackwater City knew what Damian Moretti was. The newspapers called him a suspected organized crime figure. The prosecutors called him untouchable. The people who lived in the waterfront neighborhoods where his operations ran called him nothing at all, because saying his name out loud felt like signing something you couldn't take back. Harper had met him once, 18 months ago, at a fundraiser for a trauma recovery nonprofit she'd helped establish. He'd donated $40,000 and hadn't smiled once during the entire evening. They'd spoken for 11 minutes near the bar. He'd asked her what made someone become a trauma therapist. She'd said, "Usually trauma." He'd given her his number and told her to call if she ever needed anything. She'd taken the card and told herself she never would. 2%. She pressed the number. It rang 3 times. Then a voice, low and unhurried, like a man who hadn't been sleeping. Harper. He remembered her name. She didn't know why that made her throat tighten. "Can you come get me?" Her voice cracked on the last word. She hated the sound of it, hated how small it made her feel. She was a licensed professional who spent her days helping other people rebuild their shattered lives. And here she was, bleeding on a train station step, begging a criminal for a ride. A pause. Not long, but long enough that she heard the rain on his end too, wherever he was. "Where are you?" "East Harbor Station." "I'll be there in 17 minutes. The line went dead. Harper lowered the phone to her lap. The screen went black. 1%, then nothing. She was alone in the dark now, fully. No connection to anyone. just the rain and the blood and the sound of her own breathing, which came in shallow, hitching pulls that she recognized clinically as the early stages of a panic response. She knew the techniques: grounding, controlled breathing, naming 5 things she could see. But knowing the techniques and being able to use them when your entire life had just detonated were 2 different things, and right now the gap between knowledge and function felt as wide as the harbor. She pressed her forehead to her knees and counted. She didn't pray. She hadn't done that in years, and she wasn't going to start now. She just counted. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, up to 60, then back to 1, over and over. The rain kept hitting. The blood kept running, slower now, but still warm against her cold skin. At minute 14, she heard engines. Not one engine, multiple. The low, coordinated growl of heavy vehicles moving in formation through water. She lifted her head and saw headlights cutting through the storm at the far end of the boulevard. 3 black SUVs spaced evenly, moving at a speed that suggested the driver of the lead vehicle did not care about traffic laws or hydroplaning or anything except arriving. They pulled up to the curb in a line. Doors opened on the second and third vehicles first, and men in dark coats stepped out, scanning the street with practiced efficiency. One of them spoke into a wrist mic. Another positioned himself at the corner of the station entrance, hand resting inside his jacket. Then the front passenger door of the lead SUV opened, and Damian Moretti stepped into the rain. He was taller than she remembered, or maybe she was just lower, sitting on the ground like this. He wore a dark coat over a dark shirt, no tie, and he moved through the rain like it was irrelevant, like weather was something that happened to other people. His face was hard to read in the fractured light. Sharp jaw, dark hair pushed back, eyes that cataloged everything in their field without appearing to move. He saw her, stopped walking, stood 3 feet away with rain streaming down his face, and for a moment he just looked at her, at the blood on her leg, at the soaked clothes, at the way she was holding herself together with posture alone, spine straight, even though every other part of her was falling apart. "Can you walk?" he said. "I got here, didn't I?" Something shifted behind his eyes. Not pity. She would have hated pity. Something closer to recognition, like he understood what it cost her to say that. He took off his coat and held it out without stepping closer, giving her the choice. She looked at the coat, then at him, then at the rain, and took it. The fabric was heavier than she expected, lined with something soft that held his warmth. She draped it over her shoulders and pushed herself up from the step. Her shins screamed. She swayed, caught herself on the iron gate, and straightened. "Your leg," he said. "I know. You need a hospital." "I need to not be here." He studied her for 2 seconds. Then he turned and walked toward the SUV, holding the rear door open. She limped after him, each step sending a bright line of pain up through her knee, and climbed in. The interior was warm and smelled like leather and something faintly metallic she chose not to identify. One of his men handed a first aid kit through the open door. Damian took it, set it on the seat beside her, and got in on the other side. The convoy moved. Harper opened the kit with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Inside, she found gauze, antiseptic wipes, medical tape, a small bottle of iodine. She'd treated worse in clinical settings. She'd sutured practice wounds in grad school, but doing it to yourself in the back of a mafia boss's SUV while your entire life was collapsing around you was a different skill set. "Let me," Damian said. "I can do it." "I didn't ask if you could." She looked at him. His hands were steady. His expression was neutral but not cold. She handed him the gauze. He cleaned the wound with an efficiency that surprised her. No hesitation, no squeamishness, no unnecessary pressure. He irrigated it with the iodine, packed it with gauze, and taped it with strips that were even and tight. His hands were large and his knuckles were scarred, and he touched her leg with a precision that suggested he had done this kind of thing many times before, on wounds much worse than hers. "You've done this before," she said. "Yes." "On yourself?" "On people who matter." The words landed between them and neither one reached for them. They rode in silence for several minutes. The wipers slapped against the windshield. The driver didn't ask where they were going because he apparently already knew. Harper watched the city slide past the tinted windows, the buildings blurred by rain into shapes that looked like they were melting. Trevor emptied our accounts, she said, not looking at him. Everything. Savings, checking, the emergency fund. He took the cash, wiped my laptop, and disappeared. Damien didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was flat. How much? $83,000. Everything I had. Everything I built over 7 years of clinical work. When? Tonight. I came home and it was done. You lived together. For 2 years, we were engaged, 4 months from the wedding. She heard herself say the words, and they sounded like they belonged to someone else's story. Some other woman's catastrophe, narrated from a safe clinical distance. But the blood on her leg was real and the cold was real, and the fact that she was sitting in this vehicle with this man was real. Do you know where he went? Damien said. No. Do you want to know? She turned and looked at him. The question wasn't casual. It was an offer. A specific kind of offer that came with implications she understood perfectly well, even in her current state. Not from you, she said. That's fair? I don't want to owe you anything. You already called me, Harper. That debt exists whether you name it or not. The honesty of it hit her in the sternum. She turned back to the window. The SUV pulled into an underground parking structure beneath a building she didn't recognize. The other 2 vehicles peeled off at the entrance, taking positions she assumed were strategic. Damien's driver killed the engine and opened the door. Damien stepped out first and waited. The elevator was private. Keyed access, no buttons visible. It rose without sound and opened into a penthouse that occupied the entire top floor of whatever building this was. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the storm raging across the Blackwater skyline, lightning branching over the harbor like cracks in dark glass. The furniture was minimal. Dark floors, low lighting, nothing decorative except a single shelf of books that looked like they had actually been read. A woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and sharp, clinical eyes was waiting in the kitchen. She had a medical bag open on the counter. This is Petra, Damien said. She handles injuries. I'm a physician, Petra corrected without looking up. I handle injuries, among other things. Sit. Harper sat on a stool at the kitchen island while Petra unwrapped Damien's field dressing, examined the wound, and cleaned it again with supplies that were decidedly more professional. The cut needed 6 stitches. Petra did them without anesthetic because Harper told her not to bother. You're a stubborn one, Petra said, snipping the last suture. So I've been told. Petra looked at Damien, who was standing near the windows with his back to the room, watching the storm. Something passed between them that Harper couldn't read. Then Petra packed her bag and left without saying goodbye. Harper was alone with him. The penthouse was quiet except for the rain against the glass and the low hum of the building's systems. Harper could feel the exhaustion now, a weight settling into her bones that went beyond physical fatigue. The adrenaline was fading, and what it left behind was worse. A hollowed-out, scooped-clean feeling, like someone had reached inside her chest and removed something structural. There's a guest room down the hall, Damien said, still facing the windows. Clean clothes in the closet. Lock on the door. You keep women's clothes in your guest room? I keep emergency supplies. Clothes in multiple sizes, medical kits, burner phones. I also keep a loaded weapon in the nightstand drawer. You should know that. Why are you telling me? He turned then. The city lights behind him threw his face half in shadow and half in cold blue light. Because you're a woman alone in a strange man's home, and you should know where the weapon is. Harper didn't know what to do with that. It was the most unsettling form of consideration she had ever encountered. The acknowledgement that she was vulnerable and the simultaneous offer of the means to protect herself, even from him. No man had ever said anything like that to her. Certainly not Trevor, who had spent 2 years making her feel safe while systematically hollowing out the foundation beneath her. She stood. Her shin ached but held. Thank you, she said, for coming. You called. A lot of people wouldn't have answered at 1 a.m. I'm not a lot of people. She walked down the hall, found the room, found the lock, found the clothes, folded neatly in a closet that smelled like cedar, found the gun in the nightstand, a compact 9mm, loaded, safety on. She stared at it for a long time, then closed the drawer. She showered. The hot water hit the stitches, and she bit down on a washcloth to keep from making a sound. She dressed in a cotton shirt and drawstring pants that were slightly too large and sat on the edge of the bed with wet hair dripping onto her shoulders. She thought about Trevor, about 2 years of shared meals and planned vacations and conversations about children, about the way he'd hold her hand in restaurants and tell her she was the strongest person he knew, about how none of it was real. Or maybe it was real for her, and that was worse, because it meant she'd built something genuine on a foundation of someone else's lies. She thought about the bank statement on the counter. $83,000. 7 years of early mornings and late sessions and clients who wept in her office while she held space for their pain and then went home and ate dinner alone because Trevor was working late. Working late. The phrase tasted different now. She lay down. The sheets were cool and clean and the pillow was soft and the rain against the window sounded different from this height, like static, like white noise, like the city was trying to erase itself. She didn't sleep. At 4 in the morning, she got up and walked to the kitchen for water. Damien was sitting at the island with a glass of something dark, no ice, reading a document on a tablet. He looked up when she entered but didn't speak. She poured water from a glass pitcher and drank it standing at the sink, looking out at the city. The storm had eased to a steady rain. The harbor lights reflected off the water in long, broken lines. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Go ahead." "The charity I helped build, the Renewal Project. It's a rehabilitation and trauma recovery center. I founded it 3 years ago. Trevor handled the finances." Damien set down his glass. "If Trevor was stealing from our personal accounts," Harper continued, her voice steady now, controlled, clinical, the voice she used when delivering difficult diagnoses to clients, "then he was probably stealing from the charity too. And if the money is gone, it won't just be me that's ruined. It'll be the 27 clients who depend on that program for their recovery." Damien was quiet for a long time. The tablet screen dimmed, then went dark. "There's something else," he said. Not a question, a statement. Like he already knew where this was going. "What do you mean?" "I mean your fiancé didn't just steal your money and disappear, Harper. Men like that don't improvise, they execute. And if he had access to a charity's finances, the people who gave him that access aren't going to let the trail lead back to them." The words settled over her like cold water. "You think someone else is involved? I think you called me tonight because somewhere in your gut you already knew the answer to that question." Harper set down her glass. Her hands were steady now. The trembling had stopped sometime during the shower, replaced by something harder and quieter. Something she recognized from her clinical work with survivors. The moment when the shock burned off, and what remained underneath was not sadness, but a focused, dangerous clarity. "I need to go to the charity offices tomorrow," she said. "You need to stay here." "I'm not your prisoner." "No, you're a target. And the difference between a prisoner and a protected person is whether or not you understand the threat." Before she could respond, Damien's phone buzzed on the counter. He picked it up, read something. His expression didn't change, but his hand tightened around the phone until she could see the tendons in his wrist. "What is it?" she said. He turned the screen toward her. A news alert. Local. Breaking. The Renewal Project offices had been destroyed in a fire. Arson suspected. One security guard hospitalized with severe burns. All records, all files, all financial documentation, gone. Harper stared at the screen. The kitchen was completely silent. And in that silence, she understood what Damien had been trying to tell her. Trevor hadn't just robbed her and run. He'd burned the evidence behind him, which meant whoever he was working for already knew her name, her face, and exactly where to find her. The news alert stayed on the screen between them like a wound that wouldn't close. Harper read it 3 times. Not because she needed to. The words were simple enough, the facts brutal enough. Fire. Arson. Hospitalized. Gone. She read it 3 times because her brain was doing what brains do when the information being delivered is too large for the space available. It kept trying to find a different meaning, a softer interpretation, some arrangement of those words that didn't mean what they clearly meant. There wasn't one. She set the phone back on the counter. Damien didn't reach for it. "The guard," she said. "Who was on tonight?" "You know your security staff?" "I founded the organization. I know everyone who works there." Her voice was flat, clinical, the way it got when she was holding something very large, very still. His name is Marcus Webb. He's 51. He has a daughter at Blackwater Community College. He works the overnight shift because it pays 30 cents more per hour. Damien looked at her for a moment. Then he picked up his own phone, not the one he'd shown her, a different one, and made a call that lasted 20 seconds. He asked one question. He listened. He ended the call. Third-degree burns on his left arm and shoulder. He's stable. He got out. Harper exhaled. It sounded more like a pressure valve releasing than a breath. Trevor knew the building, she said. He knew the layout. He knew Marcus worked Thursdays. He gave them everything they needed. Who is they? Damien pulled out a chair at the kitchen island and sat down. He folded his hands on the counter, and the gesture was deliberate. She recognized it as the kind of deliberateness that came from someone who had spent years controlling exactly how much of himself was visible at any given moment. 3 years ago, he said, a syndicate called the Voss Network started moving into Blackwater. Not loud. Not the way the old crews operated. They came in through legitimate infrastructure, charities, investment funds, community development programs. They needed clean organizations with real reputations, run by people who had no idea what was underneath. Harper felt the floor shift slightly beneath her feet. Not literally, something worse. The Renewal Project, she said. I don't know yet, but a rehabilitation charity with federal grant funding, a clean public record, and a founder who has zero criminal exposure. That's not a coincidence someone passes up. Trevor approached me about the charity, Harper said slowly. 3.5 years ago, he said he wanted to help. He had accounting experience, nonprofit management background, references. She stopped. I checked his references. Did you check who gave him those references? She didn't answer because the answer was no. She hadn't gone further than the names on the page. Because why would she? Because she was a trauma therapist, not an intelligence analyst. Because she had been building something she believed in, and she had trusted the man she was going to marry. She sat down on the stool across from him. How long have you known about the Voss Network? She said. Long enough. That's not an answer. It's the answer you're getting tonight. Her jaw tightened. You said I'm a target. If you know who they are and what they're doing, then you've known they were using the charity. Which means you've known Trevor was connected to them. Which means you've known about me. Damien held her gaze without flinching. Yes. The word landed between them like something dropped from a height. Harper felt heat move up through her chest, not panic, something harder, something with edges. For how long? 4 months. 4 months. She said it quietly, which was more dangerous than yelling. She knew that about herself. The quieter her voice got, the closer she was to the thing underneath. You knew for 4 months that my fiancé was laundering money through an organization I built, and you said nothing. It wasn't confirmed. Don't do that. Don't manage me with qualifications. She stood up again because sitting felt like conceding something. I had clients in that program. People rebuilding their lives after violence, after addiction, after abuse, and you sat on information that could have protected them because it wasn't confirmed. Because the moment it moved, they would have moved, and everyone connected to that charity would have become a liability. I am a liability. You are now. You weren't then, because they thought you were completely clean. You were their cover, Harper, the face they hid behind. As long as you stayed ignorant, you were useful to them. The moment Trevor ran, you became a problem. She breathed through her nose, once, twice. The kitchen felt too small and too warm. So Trevor running was the trigger. Trevor stole from them. Not from you. From them. Your accounts were the vehicle. The money that cleared through your joint savings was Voss Network funds being relocated. When Trevor took it and disappeared, he didn't steal from his fiancée. He robbed a criminal organization of several $1 million and left you behind as the address where the bill should be sent. Harper stood completely still. In her clinical training, there was a concept called the moment of integration. The instant when a patient's mind finally connected a known history with its emotional reality and the full weight of the experience became real. She'd witnessed it hundreds of times. She'd never expected to feel it from the inside like this. Like falling through a floor you thought was solid. He used me, she said. Not a question, not surprise, just the sentence, named out loud. From the beginning. And they're going to come for me because they think I know where he went, or because you're a witness to the financial infrastructure. Either way, you're a thread they need to cut. The overhead light in the kitchen felt very bright suddenly. Harper noticed small things, the grain of the countertop, the sound of rain on the window, the slight roughness of the cotton shirt she was wearing. Sensory details that the brain clings to when the larger picture becomes too much to hold. "I need a lawyer," she said. "You need to stay alive first. Lawyers come second. Don't rank my needs for me. You have a federal investigation that's going to attach your name to financial crimes you didn't commit, and a criminal organization that wants you dead before you can talk to anyone. Those are not equal problems, and the sequence matters." "I understand the sequence." "Then act like it." They stared at each other across the kitchen island. The rain was steady against the glass. Somewhere in the building below them, something mechanical hummed. Harper looked away first. Not because she lost, because there was nothing useful in winning that particular argument. She went back to the guest room and lay down and stared at the ceiling until the sky outside the window began to turn from black to gray. She did not sleep. She ran through every memory she had of Trevor Kane, every conversation, every inconsistency she'd explained away, every moment she'd noticed something was slightly off, and chosen to believe it wasn't. There were more of them than she wanted to count. She counted them anyway. By 8 in the morning, she was dressed and back in the main room. Damien was on a call, standing at the window in different clothes than the night before, his back to her. His voice was low and she caught fragments. An address on the east side, something about a manifest. A name she didn't recognize said twice with a flatness that made her glad she wasn't the person being discussed. He ended the call and turned. "There's coffee," he said. "I want to go to the charity offices." "There are no offices. There's a crime scene." "Then I want to go to the crime scene." "The police are there." "Good. I want to talk to them." He studied her. "What are you going to tell them?" "The truth. That I'm a victim. That my fiancé defrauded me and the organization I founded and disappeared. That I have no knowledge of any criminal activity. And when they ask where you've been since last night, I'll tell them I sought shelter with a friend." Something close to amusement crossed his face, though it didn't reach his eyes, and it was gone before she could be sure. "A friend. Don't make it into something." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "There's a detective named Vance on the Blackwater Organized Crime Task Force. She's been building a case against the Voss network for 14 months. She's good. She's also going to look at you as either a witness or a co-conspirator, and the difference between those two outcomes is whether you walk into her interview with evidence or without it." Harper poured herself coffee and drank it standing, the same way she'd drunk the water at 4 in the morning. She thought about her clients, about the files that had been in those offices, intake forms, treatment records, financial ledgers, grant documentation, all of it gone. The people she'd built the program to serve had their most vulnerable histories stored in those files. "The client records," she said. "Were they backed up?" "Off-site server. I had someone check this morning." She stopped, set down the mug. "You had someone check?" "Yes." "You've been tracking the renewal project." "I track anything that operates in Blackwater with Voss fingerprints on it." "And you didn't think, at any point in 4 months, that I deserved to know?" The question sat in the air. Damien walked to the kitchen and poured his own coffee and didn't answer immediately, which was its own answer. "You were safer not knowing," he said. "That's a decision you made for me." "Yes." "You don't get to do that." "I know." The admission surprised her. She'd expected a justification, a strategic explanation, another layer of logic. Instead, he just said he knew, the way a man says something when he's already had the argument with himself and lost. "I want the server access," she said. "Harper, the client records. If we can prove the financial irregularities were introduced after I delegated accounting to Trevor, if we can show the original grant documentation against what he filed, there might be a paper trail that clears the organization and gives the task force something to work with." Damien looked at her for a long time. Then he pulled out his tablet and made 3 gestures on the screen and turned it to face her. "This is everything we have on the Voss network's involvement, the shell companies they ran through the charity's vendor accounts, the payment routing, the names." He paused. "Some of those names are going to hurt." She took the tablet. looked at the screen, scrolled through it slowly. 3 pages in, she stopped. On the list of Voss Network associates with documented connections to the renewal project's financials was a name she recognized. Not Trevor's name, someone else, someone she'd considered a mentor. Dr. Elliot Marsh, co-founder of 2 other nonprofits in the city, frequent speaker at the same professional conferences Harper attended. The man who had introduced her to Trevor Kane at a fundraiser 2 years before they became a couple. She set the tablet down carefully. "Marsh," she said, "you know him." "He introduced me to Trevor." Damien said nothing. "He vetted Trevor for me. He said Trevor had worked on 3 of his other projects. He vouched for him personally." Marsh has been coordinating the nonprofit front operation for the Voss Network for at least 6 years. He identifies clean founders, places Voss-connected financial staff inside their organizations, and extracts funds through vendor accounts and grant misappropriation. "He used me specifically." She heard her voice as if from a distance. "He picked me. You were ideal. Young female founder, trauma recovery focus, strong community reputation, 0 criminal exposure. Exactly the profile they look for." "And the $40,000 Damien donated at the fundraiser." She looked up. "That fundraiser is where I met Marsh. Was that?" "I was tracking Marsh. His attendance at that event was flagged. I wanted to see who he was cultivating." "So you watched him cultivate me?" The silence was answer enough. Harper walked to the window. Below, Blackwater City moved through its morning. Cars and pedestrians and delivery trucks and all the ordinary machinery of a day that had no idea what was happening up here in this glass tower. "I need some air," she said. "The terrace is through that door. It's enclosed. Don't lean on the railing." She went through the door and stepped onto a narrow terrace that ran the length of the window. The air was cold and still damp from the night's rain. The sky was the color of old aluminum. The harbor stretched out below, flat and gray, and she could see in the far distance the smear of smoke still rising from the direction of the renewal project offices. She gripped the terrace railing and breathed. Everything she'd built, 3 years of work, of grant applications, of hiring staff, of sitting across from people who were held together with very little and trying to help them build more. All of it had been a shell, a container for someone else's crime. And the worst part, the thing that pressed against the inside of her ribs like a fist, was that the work itself had been real. The clients had been real. The recoveries had been real. That couldn't be taken back even now. But everything underneath it had been a lie from the beginning. Her phone buzzed on the railing. She'd found a charger in the guest room, and the screen showed an unknown number. She answered. The voice was male. She didn't recognize it. Calm in the way that men are calm when they have decided the outcome of something already and the conversation is procedural. "Ms. Vale, my name doesn't matter. What matters is that you have something that belongs to us, and we'd like to discuss the terms of its return." Harper kept her voice even. "I don't know what you're referring to." Trevor Kane made a withdrawal from an account that wasn't his to withdraw from. "You understand what I'm describing. We believe you know where he is." "I don't." "We believe otherwise." A pause. "We're not unreasonable people. We simply want what's ours. If you can provide us with Trevor Kane's location, everything else goes away. The investigation, the fire, the inconvenience of the last 24 hours. And if I can't provide it, then the inconvenience continues, at increasing levels of discomfort for everyone in your immediate vicinity." The line disconnected. Harper stood on the terrace holding the phone. The smoke from the distant offices was thinner now, barely visible against the gray sky. She went back inside. Damien was at the island, tablet open. He looked up when she entered and read her face. "Who called?" he said. "Someone from the Voss Network. They want Trevor's location." "What did you tell them?" "That I don't know where he is." "Do you?" "No." She put the phone on the counter. "But they don't believe me. And now they have this number." Damien looked at the phone. Then he picked it up and handed it to one of the men who had materialized silently in the doorway. The man left with it. Damien pulled a different phone from a drawer and placed it in front of her. "New number," he said. Don't use the old SIM for anything. They're going to escalate." "Yes." "You knew this was coming. I knew it was a possibility." "Damien." She said his name the way she said things that needed to land. If I'm staying here, if I'm accepting your protection, I need the whole truth. Not the version you decide I can handle. All of it. He stood across the counter from her. The morning light was growing stronger through the windows now, and it did something to the planes of his face, made him look less like a figure out of the city's dark mythology and more like a man who was very tired and working very hard not to show it. The Voss network isn't going to send messengers a second time, he said. The call was a courtesy, standard procedure. They'll wait 48 hours, maybe less, and then they'll move to direct action. What does direct action look like? It looks like what happened to the renewal project offices, except with you inside the building. Harper absorbed this. She thought about Marcus Webb's daughter at the community college, about $40,000 donated at a charity gala, about 17 minutes. Then we need to move faster than they do, she said. We. Unless you're planning to hand me a bus ticket and wish me luck. He looked at her for a moment, and something in his face shifted. Not softness, exactly. Something more structural than that. Like a decision being made at a level deeper than expression. No bus ticket, he said. Then we need to find Trevor before they do, because if they find him first, he disappears, the evidence disappears, and I spend the rest of my life as the signature on documents I never understood. Damien picked up his phone, made a call. This one lasted 40 seconds, and at the end of it, he said a single word that she couldn't quite catch. He set the phone down and looked at her. We have a location on a credit card transaction, used 14 hours ago at a motel outside the city limits. Either Trevor is still there, or he's already... The window behind him exploded inward. The sound was enormous and instantaneous, glass and pressure, and the shriek of something moving at a velocity that made the air itself flinch. Harper hit the floor by instinct before she understood what was happening. The second shot came through the broken window a half-second later and took a chunk out of the kitchen island above her head. Damien was already moving, low and fast, across the floor toward her, grabbing her arm and pulling without slowing down. Through the hallway, past the guest room, to a door she hadn't noticed that opened into a stairwell. His men appeared from somewhere below, taking the stairs two at a time, voices clipped and tight on radios. "Sniper," one of them said. "Position," Damien said. "East building, 8th floor, moving." They went down. Harper's stitched legs screamed on every step, but she kept moving because Damien's hand was on her arm, and stopping was not an option. 3 floors down, there was a reinforced door, and behind it, a room that looked like it had been built for exactly this kind of moment. No windows, concrete walls, a table with communications equipment, and a monitor bank cycling through camera feeds. Damien sat her in a chair. She was breathing hard, but her hands were steady. She noticed this about herself with a kind of detached professional interest. Her hands were steady. "They know where we are," she said. "They knew last night. They waited to see if you'd lead them to Trevor. And when I didn't, they decided I was more useful as a message. Or they decided you're a liability regardless." He was standing at the monitor bank, watching the camera feeds. "Either way, they just told us something important." "What?" He turned and looked at her, and in the cold light of the underground room, his face held something she hadn't seen on it before. Not fear. She didn't think this man experienced fear in any conventional sense. Something closer to urgency. The look of a man recalculating odds. "They just fired on my building," he said. "Which means they're not afraid of me anymore. Which means they have something that changes the math." Harper looked at the monitors. On one of the feeds, she could see the street outside, and on the street she could see vehicles, not Damien's vehicles, others, positioned at intervals that were not random. "What does that mean for us?" she said. Damien turned back to the screens. "It means," he said, "that Trevor Kane didn't just steal their money." He pulled up a feed on the central monitor. A still image, time-stamped 6 hours ago, from a traffic camera 3 blocks from the charity offices. A man in a gray jacket, face partially turned from the camera, but recognizable if you knew the jaw, the posture, the particular way he carried his shoulders. Trevor Kane. Still in the city. "He's still here," Harper said. "He never left." Damien's voice was very quiet now. The kind of quiet that wasn't calm but was something past calm. "Which means whatever he took from them, He's using it as insurance. He's holding something over them, and they can't move openly until they get it back. What could he have taken that would— Names, Damien said. Account numbers, evidence. Something that, if it reached the wrong people, would collapse the entire network. He paused. Or the right people. Harper looked at the image of Trevor on the screen, the man she'd planned to spend her life with. The man who'd held her hand in restaurants and told her she was the strongest person he knew. He was 3 blocks from the burning building, 3 blocks from the evidence he'd helped destroy. He was waiting for something. He's going to run, Harper said. He's negotiating passage out of the country. That's what the call was about. They called me because they think I'm his contingency, his backup option, the one he'd contact if everything else fell through. If that's true, he's going to reach out to you. Or I reach out to him first. Damien looked at her sharply. If I contact him, Harper said, if I tell him I know what he did and I want to negotiate, he'll come to me. He'll think I'm desperate enough to bargain. He doesn't know I'm here. He thinks I'm alone. You're not using yourself as bait. I'm not asking your permission. The room hummed. The monitor cycled. Outside on the cameras, the street was very still in the way that streets get still when something is about to happen. Damien said her name. Just her name. She looked at him. If Trevor comes to you, he said, the Voss network comes with him, because they'll be watching every move he makes. And if you're standing in front of him when they close in, then we better make sure we get to him first. She held his gaze. He held hers. The distance between them in that concrete room was exactly 4 feet, and it felt like something considerably more complicated than distance. I need you to trust me, she said. I barely know you. You came in 17 minutes. Something moved across his face. There and gone. His phone buzzed. He looked at it. His jaw set. What? She said. He turned the phone to show her. A message. No sender information. 3 words and an address. She wants out. And below it, a location. An address in the Eastern Docklands that she recognized immediately, because she had been there once, 2 years ago, when Trevor had taken her to see a building he said he was helping rehabilitate for affordable housing. He'd shown her around himself, told her all about the renovation plans, held her hand the whole time. She'd never wondered who owned it. She was about to find out exactly what it had really been for. Damien stared at the message for 4 seconds. Harper counted them. She'd developed the habit in clinical sessions, counting the seconds of silence to understand what kind of silence it was. 4 seconds was not hesitation. 4 seconds was a man deciding how much of what he already knew he was going to say out loud. You've been to that building, he said. Trevor showed it to me 2 years ago. He said it was a housing project. It's a Voss network logistics hub, has been for 3 years. He set the phone down on the table with a care that was somehow more alarming than if he'd thrown it. Which means Trevor didn't show it to you by accident. Harper felt the cold move through her again. That specific cold, the one that wasn't temperature. He was establishing my familiarity with the location, in case he ever needed a witness who could credibly claim not to know what the place was. Or in case he needed to bring you there and have you already comfortable enough not to ask questions. She looked at the address on the screen, the Eastern Docklands. She remembered the building clearly now. A converted warehouse, 4 stories, brick facade that had been partially sandblasted, new windows on the upper floors that hadn't been there originally. Trevor had pointed out the structural improvements with what she'd taken for genuine enthusiasm. She'd thought it was one of his better qualities, that enthusiasm for civic projects. She'd believed in it the way she'd believed in everything else about him. The message says she wants out, Harper said. Who is she? Damien didn't answer immediately. Damien. There's a woman named Sella Voss, he said. Daughter of the network's original founder. She's been running operations for 18 months since her father's health declined. She's the one who approved the renewal project arrangement. She's also the one who authorized the order to burn the building. So Sella Voss wants out. That's what the message says. And you don't believe it. He looked at her with something that wasn't quite patience and wasn't quite its opposite. I believe that someone sent that message. I don't yet know why. Harper looked at the monitors. The street outside was still holding that particular stillness. She thought about what she knew about decision-making under duress, how the mind under threat contracts around the most immediate threat and loses peripheral vision, how the worst choices got made in exactly the kind of compressed timeline that this situation was generating. "We're not going to that building," she said. Damien's expression shifted slightly. "Correct. But we need to know who sent it." "Also correct. So we need Trevor." He pulled up the traffic camera image again. Trevor on the street 6 hours ago, 3 blocks from the fire, still in the city, holding something valuable enough that the Voss network hadn't simply killed him or hadn't been able to. "The motel," Harper said. "The credit card transaction. Is it still live?" "As of 90 minutes ago." "Then he's there or he was there, and if he left, the room might still tell us something." She stood up. Her leg ached with a deep structural throb that the adrenaline had been managing for hours. The adrenaline was starting to thin. "I want to go." "That's not—" "He'll run if he sees your people. He knows what your people look like. He's been watching this city's power structure for years. That was part of his value to them." She stopped. "But he won't run from me. He'll think he can manage me. He's been managing me for 2 years. He'll open the door." Damien looked at her for a long time. The monitor bank hummed. Somewhere in the building above them, glass was being cleared from the floor of his penthouse. "You'll wear a wire," he said. "Obviously. 2 of my people in the parking lot. If he does anything—" "He won't. He's not that kind of dangerous. He's the kind of dangerous that uses other people to do the physical part." She heard the bitterness in her own voice and didn't bother softening it. "That's what I was for." They left through a secondary exit that came out in the parking structure of the adjacent building, through a connection she hadn't known existed and suspected was not on any official floor plan. One of Damien's men, a wide, quiet man named Cole, who moved with the careful economy of someone who had learned to take up exactly as much space as necessary and no more, drove a vehicle that was not one of the black SUVs. A gray sedan, 2 years old, the kind of car that disappeared into traffic. Damien sat in the back with Harper. He didn't speak during the drive, which took 22 minutes through the wet morning streets. He did look at her once, when they were stopped at a light on Carver Street and the city outside the window looked almost normal. A woman walking a dog, a bodega owner pulling back his security gate, pigeons on a fire escape doing pigeon things. He looked at her the way someone looks at a thing they are calculating the weight of. Not cold. Careful. She looked back at him. Neither of them said anything. The light changed. The motel was called the Harbor Rest, which was optimistic given that it was 7 blocks from the harbor, and nothing about it suggested rest. 2 floors, exterior corridors, a parking lot where several cars had clearly been there long enough to collect a film of grime over their windshields. The vacancy sign had 2 letters burned out, the kind of place that rented by the week and didn't ask for identification that matched the name on the card. Cole parked at the far end of the lot. Damien's other man, stationed separately, sent a text. "Room 214, 2nd floor, East End. Light on inside." Harper clipped the wire inside her collar. Small device, the kind that looked like a shirt button because it was a shirt button. The electronics folded inside it with a precision that suggested this wasn't something purchased at a consumer electronics store. Damien checked the connection on his end, a small earpiece he pressed into place with one finger. "I hear you," he said quietly. "Good. Harper." He said it in a way that made her look at him directly. "If he tells you anything about the evidence he's holding, the names, anything he took from the network, do not react. Don't let him know how much that information matters. He'll use it. I know how to hold a room. This isn't a therapy session. No, but the skill set overlaps more than you'd think." She opened the door. "Don't come up unless I go silent for more than 3 minutes." She walked across the parking lot. The concrete was still damp from the night's rain, darker in the shaded patches near the building's overhang. The exterior staircase was metal, and her footsteps rang against it with a clarity she didn't love. 2nd floor, East End. The doors she passed were closed, curtains drawn, one television audible through thin walls playing something with a laugh track. Room 214. She stood outside it for 1 breath, 2, then knocked. Silence for several seconds, then movement inside. The distinctive sequence of a man checking a peephole. Harper! His voice through the door was low and startled, and something else she couldn't name yet. Open the door, Trevor. The chain rattled. The deadbolt turned. The door opened 4 inches, and Trevor Kane looked at her through the gap with eyes that were doing too many things at once. Relief and calculation, and something that might have been genuine distress, and something else underneath that she had learned too late to recognize. He looked terrible. 2 days of stubble, eyes red at the rims, a cut on his lower lip that had scabbed over. He was wearing clothes he'd slept in. He smelled like fear, which had a specific chemistry she recognized from hospital waiting rooms and crisis intervention calls. Are you alone? He said. Yes. He looked past her at the corridor. Then he unlatched the chain and opened the door. She walked in. The room was a disaster in the particular way of someone who had been here longer than one night and had not been calm during that time. Takeout containers on the desk, clothes on the floor, a laptop open on the bed with 3 browser windows visible, a prepaid phone on the nightstand beside an empty glass. The curtains were drawn, and the only light came from the desk lamp and the laptop screen. Trevor closed the door and turned to face her. He looked at her shin, the bandaging visible above her sock, and his jaw moved. What happened to your leg? You locked me out, she said. In the rain. I fell. Harper, He stopped, ran a hand over his face. The gesture was familiar. She'd watched him make it 100 times at the end of long days when he was working through something. She'd always read it as exhaustion. She read it differently now. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. You don't understand what these people are. I understand what you are. She kept her voice level, the way she kept it level when a client said something she needed to sit with rather than react to. You emptied our accounts. You burned the charity offices. You left Marcus Webb to get out of a burning building alone. I didn't burn anything. That wasn't me. That was them covering. You gave them the access they needed to cover it. That's the same thing. She stepped closer. Where's the money, Trevor? He looked at her. It's gone. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. He moved to the window, pulled the curtain back a half inch, looked at the parking lot. She watched his eyes track across it. How did you find me? You used a credit card. He let the curtain fall, turned back, and his face had changed. The distress was still there, but something else had surfaced through it, sharper, more directed. You couldn't have found me from a credit card. That card is registered to a name that doesn't exist. He stopped, looked at her differently. Who brought you here? I drove myself. In what? You don't have a car, your accounts are empty, your phone was dead. He took a step toward her. Who are you with, Harper? I'm alone. You're not a good liar. You never were. It was one of the things He stopped himself. Something crossed his face that she refused to name. One of the things you what? She said. Don't. Finish the sentence. I'm not doing this. You owe me a sentence, Trevor. You owe me a lot more than that, but start with the sentence. He stood in the middle of the room with the laptop light making his face look hollowed out, and she stood 4 feet from him, and the space between them was exactly as large as 2 years of lies. It was one of the things I genuinely... He stopped again. His jaw worked. It doesn't matter. It matters to me, because you want to believe some part of it was real. Was it? He didn't answer, which was an answer. Harper breathed, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the clinical technique, the one that kept the thing underneath from surfacing too fast. Tell me about Elliot Marsh, she said. Trevor went very still. He recruited you, she said. Placed you with me specifically. The introduction, the references, the 2 years of building my trust. Marsh coordinated all of it. She watched his face. How long have you been working for the Voss network? Harper, stop. How long? You need to stop talking, and you need to tell me who brought you here, because if Moretti's people are in this parking lot right now, we are both... 4 years, she said. A guess, based on the timeline Damien had given her. You've been doing this for 4 years, which means when you met me, you were already placed. The whole thing was the assignment. The silence that followed was the loudest thing she'd heard in 2 days. Trevor sat down on the edge of the bed. He put his elbows on his knees and his face in his hands, and for a moment he looked exactly like a man she'd loved, which was the cruelest thing she'd seen in this entire catastrophe. "The money," he said into his hands. "What about it?" He lifted his face. His eyes were dry. She was surprised to realize she'd expected them not to be. "I took it because I needed leverage. Not your money, Harper. I swear to you, your $83,000 was collateral. I needed the routing to pull the network funds through a clean account, and yours was—" He stopped. "I'm sorry." "Don't." "I am." "Tell me about the evidence. Whatever you took from them that's keeping you alive, what is it?" He looked at her, and for the first time since she'd walked through the door, she saw something in his face that she couldn't read. Not guilt, not calculation. Something closer to a decision being made. "I have their ledgers," he said. 18 months of transaction records. Shell company structures, account numbers, names of government contacts they've bought. Enough to prosecute 40 people and collapse the network entirely. He paused. "Including names of 2 federal agents who've been running interference for them." Harper felt the wire against her collar and knew Damien was hearing this. "Where is it?" she said. "Encrypted. Remote server. I'm the only one with the decryption key." He leaned forward. "That's why they haven't killed me. That's why they can't. The moment I'm dead, the key dies with me and the files become unreadable." "You built a dead man's switch." "More or less." "How long does it hold?" He glanced at his phone. 48 hours from the last time I checked in. If I miss a check-in, the files route automatically to a list of recipients. Journalists, federal prosecutors, international oversight contacts. He looked at her steadily. "I built it so they couldn't just take me out quietly." Harper sat down in the desk chair. Her leg throbbed. Her head was very clear in the way that heads get clear when the situation has become simple. Not easy, but simple. Stripped of everything except the essential variables. "You need me," she said. "What?" "To get out. You need someone they're not watching. Someone who can move the decryption key out of your hands to somewhere safe so you're not the only point of failure." She looked at him. "That's what the message was. She wants out. You sent that to Damien Moretti because you knew he had me. You were asking him to let me come here so you could give me the key." Trevor said nothing. "Because if the key is only with you, they'll find a way to break your leverage eventually. They'll find someone you love or something you need or some pressure point you didn't account for. But if someone else carries it—" She stopped. "You were going to ask me to carry it." "I was going to ask if you'd help me get it to the right people. And in exchange, I tell everything I know. To the task force, on the record, including your name as a clean party, including Marcia's entire operation. I give them enough to clear you completely and take down everyone above me." He held her gaze. "I know I don't deserve to ask you for anything. I know exactly what that sounds like coming from me right now, but I'm asking anyway." Harper looked at him for a long time. The laptop screen cycled through its browser windows behind him. One of them was a flight booking page. The destination field was blank. "Where were you going to go?" she said. "Somewhere without an extradition treaty." "And me?" He didn't answer. "You were going to give me the key to use as leverage, help me get clear, and then disappear. You were never going to testify. The offer to go on record was to get me to agree to carry the key." His silence was the answer she already knew. "Give me the key anyway," she said. He blinked. "Not to help you run. To take to the task force. All of it. The ledgers, the account numbers, the names of the compromised federal agents. All of it. If I give you the key without a deal in place, I lose my protection." "You never had protection, Trevor. You had delay." She stood up. "Give me the key, and I will personally walk into Detective Vance's office and tell them where you are. You'll go into custody, which is the only place right now where you're actually safe, and the evidence will get to the people who can use it before the network finds another way to pressure you into compliance." He stared at her. She could see him running the angles, checking the math, trying to find the version of this that ended with him on a plane somewhere without consequences. She'd watched him do this kind of internal calculation 100 times and mistaken it for thoughtfulness. You're not going to let me run, he said. No. Even though He gestured at the space between them, meaning everything. Especially because of that. He was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled the prepaid phone off the nightstand, opened an app, and turned the screen to face her. A 16-character alphanumeric string. She photographed it with the second phone Damien had given her. There's a secondary file, Trevor said. A separate server. It documents something you need to know. About Marsh. About how you were selected. He pulled up another screen. Another string of characters. The full profile they built on you. Before I met you. Before any of it. Harper took the second photo. Her hands were steady. She was aware that this steadiness was the most dishonest thing about her right now, because underneath it was something with teeth that she was simply not allowing to move. Is that everything? She said. Yes. She walked to the door. Her hand was on the handle when Trevor said her name. She stopped but didn't turn around. I did care about you, he said. I know what that's worth coming from me. I know it's worth nothing. But I need you to know it was real. The part with you was the only part that was real. Harper opened the door. That's the saddest thing you've ever said to me, she said. And you've said some sad things. She walked out into the corridor. The door closed behind her. She stood for a moment on the metal walkway with the gray Blackwater morning spread out below her, the city smelling of rain and exhaust and cold salt air from the harbor. Then her phone buzzed. Not Damien's line. The new number. Unknown. She answered. A voice she didn't recognize. Female, low and precise, with an accent she couldn't immediately place. Ms. Vale, we've been watching your conversation with Mr. Kane. We're disappointed he chose to be uncooperative. We want you to know that the key he gave you is not the only piece of this equation. Harper kept walking, toward the stairs. Steady pace. Nothing that looked like running. We have something as well, the woman continued. Something Mr. Kane didn't tell you about. Something that concerns you specifically. A pause. Come to the address that was sent to you this morning. Come alone. Don't tell Moretti. If you do, we release documentation that implicates you as a knowing participant in the renewal project financial operation. Every transaction, with your signature on it. Forged, yes, but forensically indistinguishable. And in a federal investigation, forensically indistinguishable is sufficient. Harper reached the bottom of the stairs. How long do I have? She said. 1 hour. Come alone. The line went dead. Harper stopped at the edge of the parking lot. She could see the gray sedan at the far end. She could see Cole in the driver's seat. She could feel the wire against her collar, and she knew Damien had heard every word. Her phone buzzed immediately. His number. She didn't answer. She knew what he'd say. She knew the tactical logic, the reasons not to walk into a building controlled by the people who had shot through his window this morning, the reasons this was almost certainly a trap, the reasons a woman alone in a building full of dangerous people was a body count waiting to happen. She knew all of it. She also knew what forged federal evidence could do. She knew what a prosecuting attorney did with forensically indistinguishable documentation and a defendant who had no resources and no backup and a name already attached to a fraudulent charity operation. She knew exactly how that story ended because she'd had clients who lived that story, who sat across from her with their hands in their laps and their eyes on the floor describing what it felt like when the system decided what you were, and no amount of truth could rewrite the decision. She was not going to become that story. She looked at the phone, Damien's number on the screen. She thought about 17 minutes. She thought about a coat draped over her shoulders. She thought about a man who told her where the gun was. Then she turned left instead of right and walked away from the parking lot toward the street, toward the direction of the Eastern Docklands. Because the woman on the phone had said to come alone, and Harper Vale had spent 2 years being protected by a lie, and she was not going to let someone else's protection become another thing she couldn't see the underside of. She was 3 blocks away when she heard the sound behind her. Footsteps, measured, keeping pace. She didn't stop walking. I heard everything, Damien said, falling into step beside her. I told you not to come. You didn't tell me anything. You didn't answer the phone. That was the answer. No, he said, and his voice was very quiet, the way it got when he was past argument and into something else. That was you deciding to do something catastrophically stupid, Because you don't trust anyone and you've been burned badly enough that you'd rather walk into a building full of people who want to kill you than accept help from someone who might also eventually hurt you. Harper kept walking. That's not wrong, she said. I know it's not wrong. I'm not asking you to stop being right. I'm asking you to let me walk in there with you. She stopped. He stopped beside her. The street was quiet around them, morning traffic thin, the harbor visible at the end of the block, flat and silver and going nowhere. If you come with me, she said, she'll know I didn't come alone, and she'll release the forged documents. Let her. You don't understand what forged federal. I understand exactly what they are, and I have a lawyer who has successfully challenged forensic document evidence in 3 federal cases and won all 3. He held her gaze, held her. I'm not asking you to trust me with your feelings, Harper. I'm asking you to trust me with your life. Those are different asks. She looked at him. The city moved around them, indifferent, doing what cities did. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She looked at the screen. Not a call. A photo. The photo showed the inside of a room she recognized. The intake office of the renewal project. Except the room was intact. Not burned, not destroyed. A backup location, somewhere she hadn't known existed. And sitting in a chair in the middle of the room, wrists zip-tied to the armrests, was a woman Harper had known for 3 years. Nadia Osei, her program director, the woman who ran the daily operations of the renewal project, who managed the staff, who sat with the clients when Harper wasn't there, who had a 3-year-old daughter and a commute that took 45 minutes each way because she couldn't afford to live closer to the office. Nadia looked at the camera with the specific expression Harper had seen on clients in the worst moments of their crises. The expression that meant, I am holding on, but not by much. Below the photo, a single line of text. 1 hour just became 30 minutes. And she comes with you. Harper stared at the screen. The blood moved very loudly through her ears for a moment. Then it went quiet. She showed Damien the photo. He looked at it. His face went completely still, the way faces go still when the person behind them is making a rapid series of decisions that have no good options. They took your staff, he said. They took Nadia. Harper's voice was level. The levelness cost her something she couldn't name. She has a daughter. I know. 30 minutes. I know. She looked at him. So let's stop talking about whether I'm going alone. The Eastern Docklands were 4 minutes away by car. She could feel the 30 minutes already beginning to compress, the way time compressed when it was counted, when every second that passed was a second closer to something that couldn't be undone. She started walking, and Damien walked with her, and neither of them spoke again until they reached the car. And by then the plan was already forming in the space between them, unspoken and incomplete, and moving at the speed of 30 minutes that felt like 30 seconds. And Harper Vale, who had spent 2 years being the most trusting person in every room she entered, was walking toward the place that had been waiting for her all along with her eyes open and her hands steady and the understanding, landing now with the full weight of everything the last 24 hours had cost her, that the woman she'd been before last night was already. The car moved through the Eastern Docklands at a speed that was deliberate rather than fast. Fast drew attention. Deliberate drew nothing. Harper sat in the back with Damien, and they didn't speak for the first 2 minutes. Cole drove. Another man Harper didn't know rode in the passenger seat with a compact radio pressed close to his ear, relaying information in fragments that she absorbed and filed. 2 vehicles outside the target building, 3 confirmed on upper floor, 1 unknown in the south corridor, federal surveillance van 2 blocks east that had been there since 6 this morning. Federal surveillance, Harper said. Task force, Damien said. Detective Vance's people. They've had eyes on that building for 11 days. So the task force knows about this location. They know about the building. They don't know about Nadia. He looked at her. If we call them in now, Celavos will know within minutes. Those 2 compromised federal agents Trevor told you about, they're not former employees, they're active. Harper absorbed this. 23 minutes remaining on the clock. The math was not comfortable. So we go in before Vance's people know we're there, she said. We go in through the south loading dock. There's a freight elevator that hasn't been operational in 6 years. They won't have it covered because there's nothing to cover. We've been inside this building before. When? 8 months ago. Different circumstances. He didn't elaborate, and she didn't push. The sedan pulled into an alley that ran parallel to the building's south face. Brick wall to their left, a rusted chain-link fence to their right, puddles from last night's rain still standing in the low points of the cracked asphalt. The building loomed at the end of the alley, 4 stories of industrial brick with new windows on the upper floors that caught the gray morning sky and gave nothing back. Cole killed the engine. Silence except for the distant sounds of the harbor. Gulls. A container ship somewhere on the water, its horn low and long and indifferent to everything happening on this particular block. Damien's man in the passenger seat turned around and handed Harper a small radio earpiece. She pressed it in. Clear channel. Already live. "You stay behind me," Damien said. "I'm not." "Not control. Geometry." His voice was flat. "You're the person they want in the room. If you're in front of me and something happens in the first 10 feet, this ends immediately. You stay behind me until we're inside and I know the layout is clean, and then you go where you need to go." Agreed. It was not entirely a question. She recognized the distinction and decided this was not the moment to argue topology. "Agreed," she said. They moved. The loading dock door was padlocked with a chain that had been there long enough to oxidize. One of Damien's men, she'd started thinking of him as radio for the earpiece, produced a bolt cutter from a bag that appeared from the sedan's trunk with the quiet efficiency of people who planned for specific contingencies. The chain dropped. The door opened inward on hinges that groaned once and then held. Inside, dark, cold, the smell of concrete and old machine oil and something chemical underneath that she couldn't identify. A loading floor with wooden pallets stacked against one wall, some of them broken. The freight elevator at the far end was exactly what Damien had described, a cage lift with an accordion gate that had been pulled shut and left. The power panel beside it was dead, switches all in the off position. Radio went to the panel and did something she couldn't see. A soft mechanical thud. The elevator hummed. They rode up in silence. The cage shook slightly on its track. Harper counted floors by the passing of the structural beams. 2nd floor. 3rd. The gate opened on the 4th floor. A corridor. Concrete walls. Exposed conduit. No overhead lights except what came through 2 high, narrow windows at either end. Doors at intervals, all closed. The air up here was warmer and the smell was different. Something cooked recently. Someone had been living in this building. Radio spoke at a murmur into his radio, listened, held up 3 fingers, pointed right. 3 of them, 30 meters ahead. Damien moved without sound. He had the quality, Harper noticed, of someone who had learned to occupy space at a volume below ambient. She followed, placing her feet where he placed his, favoring the wall where the floor was most solid. Her stitched shin throbbed with every step. She breathed through it. 16 minutes. They stopped at a corner. Damien pressed close to the wall and looked around it for 2 seconds, then pulled back, held up 4 fingers, revised upward, then pointed to the 3rd door on the right side of the corridor. Harper leaned close to his ear. "Nadia." He nodded once. The corridor was quiet. Whatever was happening in those rooms was happening below speaking volume, which was worse than noise. Noise told you where people were. Silence told you nothing. Then a sound. Clear, through the 3rd door on the right. A voice Harper knew. Nadia's voice, speaking with the controlled flatness of someone who was frightened and refusing to perform the fear for an audience. "I don't know anything about any accounts. I ran the program operations. I scheduled appointments and supervised staff. And I have a child I need to get back to." A second voice, male, bored, in the way that men are bored when they have already decided on an outcome and the conversation is administrative. "We understand. We're not asking about accounts. We're asking about access. Who had access to the intake files?" "Everyone. The clinical team. The admin staff. It's a nonprofit, not a bank." "Who had access to the physical server room?" A pause. "Ms. Vale and Trevor Kane," Nadia said. "That was it. I never had keycard access." Harper heard her own name and felt something move through her that was not quite guilt and not quite relief, and was not anything she wanted to spend time examining right now. Damien touched her shoulder, 2 fingers pointing down. "Get low." She crouched. He moved to the other side of the door frame. Radio positioned himself behind them both, facing the corridor they'd come through. Damien looked at her, held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. He opened the door. The room was large and lit with construction lighting, temporary LED fixtures on stands that threw everything in sharp, shadowless white. It was set up as an office of sorts, a folding table, laptop, 2 chairs, a rolling whiteboard with figures written in marker that Harper's eyes went to immediately and then left, because Nadia was in the center of the room in a chair with her wrists bound to the armrests with zip ties, and 2 men were standing and a third was seated at the laptop, and none of them had been expecting the door to open. The 2 seconds of collective paralysis were all Damien needed. What followed was not clean. It was fast, and it was loud, and it had the particular brutality of people who had been trained to close distance quickly and neutralize variables. Harper pressed against the wall inside the door because she had been told geometry mattered, and she believed it now in a way that was entirely visceral. One of the standing men went down hard against the folding table, and the table went with him. The laptop slid to the floor. The third man, the one who had been seated, got upright and reached for something at his hip, and radio came through the door behind Harper, and the something never cleared the holster. 11 seconds. Then quiet. Damien was across the room at Nadia before the quiet finished settling. He had a blade out, a folding knife, small, opened with one hand, and he cut the zip tie on her left wrist in a single pass. She pulled her hand free and he did the right side, and she stood up immediately, which was the right instinct, get vertical, and swayed, which was the inevitable correction. Harper was already there. She caught Nadia by the arms. Nadia grabbed her back, both hands, the grip of someone who has been alone in a bad situation for long enough that contact feels like oxygen. "I've got you," Harper said. "Look at me, right here, I've got you." Nadia looked at her. Her eyes were clear, pupils even, a bruise forming on her left cheekbone that hadn't been there the last time Harper had seen her. She was breathing too fast. "My daughter," she said. "She's fine. She doesn't know anything happened. You're going to see her." Harper held her gaze. "Right now I need you to walk. Can you walk?" "Yes." "Then we're going." Damien was at the laptop. He'd righted it from the floor, and his hands moved across the keyboard with a speed that suggested he knew what he was looking for. Harper looked at him. 14 minutes, she said. 11 seconds. He turned the laptop to face her. On the screen was a document viewer, and inside it were pages she recognized. The intake forms of the renewal project, scanned, with a series of digital annotations in red that marked specific entries. Client names, dates, financial reference numbers. The forged documentation the woman on the phone had threatened to release. But beside it, on a split screen, were pages she had never seen before. Transaction records. Not the charities. These had different headers, different account structures. These were the records Trevor had told her about. The Voss network ledgers. 18 months of movement. "They have the same files," Harper said. "They took copies when they burned the offices. They've been holding them as leverage against Trevor." Damien's jaw was tight. "Which means the files Trevor gave you the key for. They don't need those anymore. They have their own access." The weight of this landed on Harper like something structural. "So the key is worthless," she said, "as leverage against them, not as evidence for the task force. The task force can still use it." He closed the laptop, took it. "But it changes the timeline." A sound from the corridor, radio's voice in the earpiece, 2 more, coming from the north end, 3 minutes out. "We need to move," Damien said. They moved. Nadia held Harper's arm and Harper held back, and they went through the door into the corridor, and radio was already 20 feet ahead, checking angles. The freight elevator was at the south end, 1 minute of open corridor away. 50 feet, 40, 30. The corridor door at the north end opened. Harper heard it before she saw it. The specific sound of a heavy fire door thrown open without concern for who heard it. Then footsteps. 2 sets, fast. Radio stopped. Turned. Made a decision in the time it took Harper to blink. "Get them out," he said to Damien. Then he went back the way they'd come. Damien didn't argue and didn't pause. He put his hand on Harper's back and kept her moving. Nadia matched pace. The elevator gate was 10 feet away when the sound behind them changed. the crack of something compressed and loud that bounced off the concrete walls and made Nadia flinch and made Harper's ears ring, but she didn't stop because Damien's hand was on her back and stopping was not listed among the available choices. Elevator gate. Cage interior. The accordion gate pulled shut with a clatter that seemed very loud in the ringing silence. Damien hit the panel. The lift shuddered and began its descent. Harper looked up through the cage at the corridor above them, visible until the second floor swallowed it. Nothing appeared in the frame. The descent continued. Loading dock. Out through the door, the alley. The sedan was exactly where they'd left it, Cole behind the wheel, engine already running. They got in. Cole drove before the doors were fully closed, taking the alley exit at the far end, away from the building, turning onto a service road that ran parallel to the harbor. Nadia sat between Harper and Damien on the back seat with her hand pressed flat against her sternum like she was trying to hold something in. Radio, Harper said. Damien was already on the radio. He asked a single question and listened. His face didn't change, but something behind it did. A shift in the set of his jaw, a tightening around the eyes that was very controlled and very final. He lowered the radio. "He's out," he said. "South stairwell. He's mobile." Harper breathed. They drove for 6 blocks before Damien spoke again. "Celavos wasn't in that room." "No," Harper said. "She sent intermediaries, which means she's not in the building." He looked out the window at the harbor, the flat gray water moving under the gray sky. "She's watching from somewhere, waiting to see if we'd walk in. She wanted to know if I'd come without you. She wanted to know if I'd let you come without me, if I'd sacrifice your safety to follow instructions." He paused, testing my limits. "What does that tell her? That I'm emotionally compromised, that I care enough about one person to do something tactically imprudent." He said it plainly, without inflection, the way he said things that were simply facts and not comfortable ones. Harper looked at him. He was looking at the harbor. "Damien, I know what it tells her," he said. "I made the calculation. And the calculation came out the same way it did at 1 o'clock this morning when you called me from a train station in the rain." He turned from the window. "Some calculations aren't actually hard." Nadia between them said nothing, but Harper felt her exhale slowly, like a woman quietly noting something down. Harper's new phone buzzed. Unknown number. She looked at Damien first. He nodded. She answered. The voice was the same one from the earlier call. Female, low, precise. Celavos confirming what Harper had suspected. She had the kind of voice that expected to be listened to and had been correct in that expectation for long enough that the expectation had become the voice itself. "You brought him," Cella said. "Yes." "I said alone." "You were never going to release Nadia either way. The forged documents were already staged. The conversation was already staged. The only variable you were genuinely testing was whether Moretti would follow you into a building you controlled." Harper kept her voice even. "He didn't. You don't have him." A pause, just long enough to be meaningful. "You're smarter than Trevor said," Cella said. "Trevor underestimates people. It's a consistent failure. He said you were idealistic, that you built things because you believed in them, that you couldn't see the infrastructure underneath because you were too focused on the outcome." "He wasn't wrong," Harper said. "I wasn't looking. I am now." "What are you looking at?" A woman who built her father's network into something that required 40 shell companies and 2 compromised federal agents to sustain, who has been running a financial operation of that scale for 18 months and hasn't been indicted, which means she's either very careful or very connected. Harper paused. "And who is calling me personally instead of sending another intermediary, which means either she's angry or she wants something she can only get from me directly." The silence on the line had a different quality now, not the silence of someone buying time, the silence of someone adjusting. "The decryption key," Cella said. "Yes." "Trevor gave it to you." "Yes." "And you're going to take it to the task force." "That's my plan." "The task force has 2 corrupted agents. Anything you bring them gets back to me within the hour." "I'm aware. I'm not taking it to the compromised agents. I'm taking it directly to Detective Vance." Harper kept her voice level. Who has been building a case against your network for 14 months, and whose investigative notes, according to my understanding, are not shared with the two agents in question because she identified the leak 8 months ago and has been managing around it? Another silence. Longer this time. Trevor told you about Vance, Sella said. Trevor told me about the compromised agents. I know about Vance because Damian Moretti has been watching your operation for 4 months, and Vance has been watching it for 14, and they've been arriving at the same conclusions from different directions. Harper paused. You're not as insulated as you think. You never were. If you go to Vance, I release the forged documents. Release them. Vance will have the original records from the renewal project server, the decryption key for your network's own transaction ledgers, and a witness, Trevor Kane, who can speak to the specific process by which the forgeries were created, including the technology used and the timeline of their production. Harper breathed through the next 2 words. Do it. The silence that followed was the longest yet. When Sella spoke again, something in her voice had shifted. The precision was still there, but the certainty underneath it had developed a crack. You're asking me to surrender, she said. I'm telling you that the window in which surrender is still an option is closing. Harper looked at Damian. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't fully name. The task force will move on your network regardless of what I bring them. What I bring them determines whether you have any negotiating position at all when they do. You're a therapist, Sella said, not a prosecutor. I spend my professional life helping people navigate the consequences of choices they can't take back. I know exactly what that process looks like from the inside. Harper let a beat pass. You're at the last moment before the choice becomes permanent. I don't have anything personal against you. I want my organization cleared, my clients protected, and the woman you had zip-tied to a chair to get home to her daughter. The rest of this is between you and the task force. The line was quiet for 4 seconds. Then, the building, the documents on the server. I'll leave them accessible. I need more than that. That's what I'm offering. I need Elliot Marsh. A pause. Marsh isn't mine to give. Marsh recruited for you for 6 years. He absolutely is yours to give. Harper's voice didn't rise. It went the other direction. Give me Marsh. Give me access to the documents, and I'll tell the task force that you cooperated. The rest is up to Vance. Damian reached out and touched her wrist, not to stop her. The touch of someone communicating something without words. She glanced at him. He moved 2 fingers. Keep going. Marsh, Sela said. The word came out with the sound of something being put down. Marsh, Harper said. I'll send you a location. A pause. One more thing, Ms. Vale. The 48-hour dead man switch on Trevor's files. I need that clock extended. I can ask him. I can't promise. Try. The line went dead. The sedan was still moving through the eastern waterfront. The harbor had widened on their right, gray and flat and enormous. Cole drove without being told where to go, following some predetermined route that looped them away from the docklands and back toward the interior of the city. Harper lowered the phone. Her hands were still steady. Her shin was not. Her shin had moved past throbbing into a constant, blunt commentary on everything she had done to it in the last 8 hours, and she was becoming less able to manage the conversation. You got Marsh, Damian said. Not a question. She'll give us his location. She's buying time. I know, but the documents on that building server are real, and we need them before she changes her mind or someone clears the building. Harper looked at him. How fast can we get to Vance? Depends on whether Vance wants to be gotten to. Call her. I don't have Vance's number. Then find someone who does, because we have the decryption key for 18 months of Voss Network transactions and a sitting Voss Network asset who just agreed to cooperate and a witness in custody who can testify to the entire financial structure, and all of that is worth exactly nothing if we can't get it to someone who can act on it in the next... Her phone buzzed. A message from the unknown number. An address. Not in the docklands. Across town, in the warehouse district near the old train yards. Marsh. Damian looked at the address and his face went very still. What? Harper said. That address is 3 blocks from the federal field office. He said it slowly. Which means Selavos just pointed us at a man who is either already in custody or about to be. Either she's giving us something real or she's sending us directly into a federal operation that will sweep us up alongside everything else. Harper looked at the address, looked at Nadia, who had her eyes closed and her head tipped back against the seat, and was breathing in the long, conscious way of someone using every technique she had to hold herself together. Looked at Damien. "Which is it?" she said. "I don't know yet." "Then we go find out." Cole was already adjusting course. The sedan moved through the morning city, through streets that were busy now with ordinary people doing ordinary things, and Harper sat in the back with a stolen laptop full of criminal evidence and a decryption key memorized on a phone and a program director with a bruised cheekbone and a Mafia boss who had made a calculation and found it came out the same way twice. And outside the windows, Blackwater City went about its business, entirely unaware that the last 28 hours had been building toward something that was now approximately 6 blocks away and moving toward them at the same speed they were moving toward it. Her phone buzzed again. This time the number was saved. Trevor. One word, coming. She showed Damien, his jaw set. He's moving. He said he'd go into custody. He said a lot of things. Damien took out his own phone and made a call that lasted 8 seconds and ended with an address given in a clipped, flat voice that carried the weight of an instruction rather than a request. He put the phone away. "I have people at the federal field office. If Trevor walks in, we'll know. And if he doesn't walk in, then we'll know that too." The sedan rounded a corner and the warehouse district opened up ahead of them. Low buildings, chain link, the skeletal infrastructure of the city's industrial past that had been neither demolished nor repurposed, just left, the way cities leave things when they can't decide what comes next. And there, on the corner of a block that backed up to the old train yard fence, was a man in a gray jacket with his hands in his pockets and his face turned away from the street. Cole slowed. The man turned. Not Marsh. Trevor Kane stood on the corner of a block 3 blocks from the federal field office with an expression on his face that Harper had never seen before and could not immediately categorize. And at his side, her hand on his arm in a grip that was simultaneously proprietary and restraining, was a woman Harper did not recognize. Small, precise, dark-haired, wearing a coat that was too good for this neighborhood, who turned toward the sedan with eyes that moved to Damien's face with an immediate recognition that confirmed exactly who she was. Selavos had not sent them to Marsh. She had sent them to Trevor. And Trevor had not been going to the federal field office. He had been going to her. Harper stared through the window at the man who had been her fiancé and the woman who had built the architecture of everything that had destroyed the last 2 years of her life, standing together on a corner 3 blocks from a building full of federal agents, and she understood in the space of one breath that the dead man's switch, the decryption key, the cooperation offer, the location of Marsh, all of it had been choreography. All of it had been designed to move Harper Vale and Damien Moretti to this exact corner at this exact moment. Cole's hand moved toward the gear shift. "Don't stop," Damien said. Cole didn't stop. They passed the corner at a steady pace, and Harper kept her face forward and her breathing even and did not look at Trevor Kane through the window, because if she looked at him, she would feel something, and if she felt something right now, it would cost her the clarity she needed for what was coming next. They were half a block past the corner when the black SUV appeared in the rearview mirror, then a second one, pulling out from the side street where they had been waiting. "Company," Cole said. Damien looked in the mirror, looked at Harper. His face was the face of a man who has run the calculation again and is noting that the variables have changed, but the answer has not. "The building," Harper said. "The documents on the Voss server. If we don't get those to Vance before Sella moves them, I know." "Damien, I know." He picked up his radio, spoke into it briefly. "An address. Not the warehouse district, not the Docklands, somewhere else." He put the radio down. "There is a woman named Agent Claire Vance who is sitting in a surveillance van 2 miles from here and who has been waiting 14 months for something she can use." He looked at Harper. "I'm going to give her a reason to move." "How?" "By driving this car into the middle of her surveillance operation and walking in the front door of her van with a stolen laptop and a decryption key and a very complicated explanation." He said it with the particular flatness of someone who understood exactly how improbable the sentence they'd just spoken was. Which means I need you to trust me one more time. Harper looked at the rearview mirror. The two black SUVs were maintaining distance. Professional distance. The kind of distance that was not pursuit but presence. The kind that said, we know where you're going and we'll be there when you arrive. She looked at Damien. You said some calculations aren't hard, she said. They're not. This one feels hard. That's because you're tired and your leg hurts, and you've been awake for 30 hours, and the man you were going to marry just stood on a corner with the woman who burned down everything you built. He held her gaze. It's hard. The answer is still the same. Outside the window, Blackwater City moved past. The warehouses giving way to the mid-city blocks, the streets wider here, more traffic, the ordinary density of a city doing its ordinary things, and somewhere in it a surveillance van with a 14-month case file and a detective who had been building a house one careful brick at a time and was about to have. Cole drove toward the surveillance van the way you drive toward something you can't take back. Steady speed, no hesitation, the decision already made and the body just executing it. The two black SUVs behind them maintained their distance, professional and patient, the kind of patience that came from knowing the destination before the car arrived. They know where we're going, Harper said. Yes. Which means Sella knows about Vance. She's known about Vance for months. The two compromised agents would have told her. Damien was watching the mirror. She's letting us drive to the van because she thinks she controls what happens when we get there. Does she? She controls two agents. She doesn't control Vance. He picked up his radio, spoke into it. 3 words and a number. Put it down. I just told my people to move on the building in the Docklands, the server with the documents. Whatever Sella left accessible, we're pulling it now, before she changes her mind or the compromised agents warn her we're moving. Harper looked at the laptop on the seat between them. The Voss network ledgers. 18 months of transactions. She thought about the decryption key on her phone. She thought about Trevor standing on that corner with Sella Voss's hand on his arm, and the particular expression on his face, not guilt this time. Something she hadn't seen on him in 2 years. Something that looked, at that distance and that speed, like relief. Like a man who had finally stopped pretending to be 2 things at once. It was the most honest she had ever seen him look. It did not make her feel better. It made her feel something more complicated than better. Something that would take a long time and a great deal of private, quiet, unwitnessed work to process. She set it aside. Not down. She had learned the difference. Set it aside, where it would wait. Cole turned onto a street she didn't recognize. Low buildings, a construction fence on one side, a lot that had been cleared for something that hadn't been built yet. At the far end, backed against the construction fence, was a white panel van with a communications antenna on the roof that was either very subtle or not trying to be subtle at all. That's it, Damien said. Cole stopped. Damien got out. Harper got out. Nadia stayed in the car because Harper had asked her to, and because Nadia Osei was a practical woman who understood that she'd already been through enough today. They walked toward the van. Halfway there, the rear doors opened and a woman stepped out who moved with the specific contained energy of someone who had been sitting in a metal box for 11 days watching a building and was not happy about being interrupted. Detective Claire Vance was 43, medium height, natural haircut close, wearing civilian clothes that were professional without being formal. Her eyes moved over Damien first, then Harper, then the laptop under Damien's arm, and the sequence of that assessment told Harper a great deal about what 14 months of this case had taught the detective about which variables mattered. You've got about 40 seconds before my 2 least favorite colleagues figure out you're here, Vance said. Not a greeting. A timeline. Then don't waste them, Damien said. He held out the laptop. Vance looked at it without taking it. Where did that come from? The 4th floor of the building you've had eyes on for 11 days. Voss network transaction records, 18 months, shell company structures, account numbers, names of government contacts. He paused. Including yours. Vance's expression didn't change. Excuse me. They have a file on you too. Standard practice. They build files on everyone who poses a potential threat. Yours goes back 14 months. He met her eyes. I'm telling you because you should know. And because the two agents who've been running interference for them will tell Celavos within the hour that you've spoken to us. She'll move the documentation against you within 2 hours. Whatever she has, she'll use it. What does she have? I don't know. But the fact that you're still here after 14 months suggests it's not as clean as whatever she releases is going to look. He said it without apology, which was the right choice. Vance was not a woman who wanted to be managed. The decryption key for the full ledger is on Ms. Vale's phone. The ledger will show you everything they have on you alongside everything they've done. Transparency is better than what they release on their terms. Vance stood on the street outside her surveillance van and looked at him for a long, flat moment. The construction fence behind her creaked in the harbor wind. "You're giving me a case file," she said. "I'm giving you the materials to build one. There's a distinction. And what do you want for it?" Harper Vale's name removed from any investigative theory that includes the word knowing. She didn't know. The financial operation was layered underneath a legitimate program she built and ran in good faith. He stopped. "That's it." Vance looked at Harper. "Is that it?" Harper looked back at her. "Elliot Marsh. He recruited for the network for 6 years. He placed Trevor Kane with me specifically, and he's done it to at least 3 other nonprofit founders in this city. I want him in a room answering questions. I've got Marsh on my radar. Celavos sent us his location this morning. I think she gave him up." Harper held Vance's gaze. "I think she's more pragmatic than she wants people to believe. I think she sent us to Trevor to create a scene that would give her leverage, and when it didn't work, she gave us Marsh as a consolation offer, which means she's building a case for cooperation." Vance absorbed this. The van's antenna hummed above them in the wind. "And Moretti," Vance said. "What do I do about Moretti?" "That's between you and him," Harper said. "He just handed me stolen property from a crime scene." "He handed you evidence of 18 months of financial crimes, 2 corrupted federal agents, and a network that has been using legitimate social services as a money pipeline." Harper didn't look away. "What you do with that evidence is your professional judgment. What you do with the person who brought it to you is also your professional judgment. I'm a therapist, detective. I don't give legal advice." Something moved across Vance's face. Not amusement exactly, the ghost of it. She took the laptop. She looked at Damien one more time. "I'm going to need a statement. I'll have my attorney call you this afternoon." "Today." "This afternoon," he said again, with a patience that was not accommodating but was very precise. Vance went back to the van. The doors closed. Through the van's small side window, Harper could see movement, the shape of people suddenly with purpose, and she understood that whatever had been in progress inside that van for 11 days had just shifted from surveillance to action. They walked back to the sedan. Damien's phone rang as they reached the car. He answered, listened for 20 seconds. And by the time he ended the call, the quality of the air around him had changed. Something had settled. The particular tension that had lived in his jaw since the penthouse window exploded was not gone, but was different now, compressed into something that could be held rather than something that was actively expanding. "The building," he said. "My people pulled the documents from the server, all of it. The forged documentation against Harper, the original renewal project records, the financial structure files. It's been transmitted to Vance's secure server. Her technical team just confirmed receipt." Harper stood on the street and breathed. Just breathed. In and out, the way you do when you've been managing your breathing consciously for so many hours that the conscious management has become the only kind you remember how to do. "It's done," she said. "The heavy part," he said. She nodded. She understood the distinction. In the sedan, Nadia had her eyes open and her head against the window, watching the city. When Harper got in beside her, Nadia reached over without looking and put her hand over Harper's. Didn't say anything. Harper didn't say anything either. They sat like that for 30 seconds while Cole waited for directions. "Take her home," Harper said. "Nadia first." Cole drove. The next 4 hours were not cinematic. They were the hours that followed the cinematic part, which were always harder in different ways. Damien's attorney, a compact man named Rice, who wore his composure like a garment he'd had tailored, arrived at a location that was not the penthouse. The penthouse was still a crime scene, glass and forensics teams, and the particular bureaucratic aftermath of a sniper round through a residential window. The new location was a smaller apartment in a building Damien apparently maintained for exactly these kinds of continuity situations, which told Harper something about the kind of life he operated inside. She gave her statement to Rice first, then to a second attorney who worked specifically on federal financial cases and was introduced simply as Kimura. She went through the timeline from the joint account statement on the kitchen counter to the conversation with Vance on the street, without omission and without editorializing, with the precise factual delivery she used in clinical documentation when the details mattered more than the feeling. Kimura took notes without expression. At the end, he said, "Your exposure is manageable. The forged documentation is already being forensically reviewed. The timeline you've described is consistent with the financial records recovered from the server. I don't anticipate charges." He closed his notebook. "I've seen worse situations produce cleaner outcomes." "Is that meant to be reassuring?" Harper said. "It's meant to be accurate," Kimura said. "Reassurance isn't what I'm paid for." She decided she liked him. Trevor was taken into federal custody at 2:47 in the afternoon. Harper learned this from Vance, who called her directly on a number Harper hadn't given her and had apparently obtained through means that confirmed Vance was exactly as thorough as 14 months of sustained surveillance suggested. The custody was quiet. No arrest drama. No perp walk. Trevor Kane walking into the federal field office through a side entrance with his attorney beside him, and the particular posture of someone who had been carrying something very heavy for a long time and had finally put it down, regardless of what it cost. He had extended the dead man's switch before going in, given himself 24 additional hours, given the task force time to verify and secure what he was handing over. Harper didn't know whether to read that as conscience or strategy. She decided both could be true. She'd spent enough years in clinical practice to understand that most human acts contained multiple motivations stacked against each other, and sorting them out was less useful than accepting that the act had happened regardless of the motivation. Elliot Marsh was taken into custody 40 minutes later at the address Sela Voss had sent. He was found in a back office of a building he owned through 3 layers of LLC, sitting with a coffee that had gone cold and a phone he was no longer using, looking like a man who had been expecting a knock on a door for a long time and had simply been waiting for the specific door. Harper didn't feel satisfaction when Rice told her. She felt the particular hollowness of an outcome arriving after the emotional labor of pursuing it was already spent. Marsh had introduced her to Trevor Kane at a fundraiser 4 years ago, with a warmth and a vouching that she had believed completely, because she'd had no reason not to. Because the entire purpose of a man like Marsh was to be believed completely. He'd done his job very well for a very long time. What she felt, sitting in Damien's secondary apartment with her leg elevated on a footstool and a cup of coffee going cold in her own hands, was something more like grief than anger. Grief for the organization she'd built. Grief for the version of her life that had existed as recently as 48 hours ago before a bank statement on a kitchen counter. Grief for the woman who had walked into that fundraiser 4 years ago believing she was building something clean. That woman was not destroyed. But she was changed in ways that could not be unchanged. And Harper Vale was clear-eyed enough about psychology to know that the work of integrating those changes would take years, not weeks, and would not be linear, and would require a great deal of the same professional support she had spent her career providing to others. She was going to need a therapist. The thought arrived with something close to dark humor, and she let it. Around 5 in the afternoon, the apartment had emptied of attorneys and the operational personnel who had been moving through it in shifts. Nadia had been collected by her sister, who had driven from across the city with the kind of silent, furious love that showed up with no explanation and did not require one. The bruise on Nadia's cheek would fade. Her daughter had been at school all day and knew nothing. And when Nadia walked through her front door that evening and her daughter ran to her, the gap between what had happened and what the child knew would serve as a mercy, which was all merciless situations ever offered. Harper was alone in the apartment's main room when Damien came in from the terrace, where he'd been on a call. He sat down across from her, not beside her. The deliberateness of the distance was something she noted and didn't comment on. Vance confirmed the server documents, he said. They're building the formal case structure now. She said to tell you the renewal project's non-profit status is being preserved pending investigation, and the client records are protected. He paused. Your clients are protected. Harper looked at her cold coffee. The center, she said. The physical offices are gone. Insurance covers structural damage from arson. The policy is intact. I had Rice check. You had Rice check my insurance policy. He's thorough. I noticed. She looked up at him. You're going to tell me I can rebuild? No, he said. I'm going to tell you that rebuilding is possible, which is different. Whether you do it is your decision, and it's not a simple one, and I don't have any useful input on it. She looked at him for a moment. That's the most honest thing anyone has said to me in 2 days. It's the most honest thing anyone has said to you in longer than that. The room was quiet around them. Outside, Blackwater City was settling into its early evening, the light changing from the flat gray of the day to the amber and shadow of a city coming indoors. And through the apartment's windows, Harper could see the tops of buildings going golden and the harbor in the far distance going from silver to dark. She thought about calling this man from a train station in the rain. She thought about the 16 minutes and 53 seconds she had spent counting Mississippis on wet concrete. She thought about a coat placed over her shoulders by someone who gave her the choice of taking it. I need to ask you something, she said. Go ahead. When you donated $40,000 to the renewal project, the night you met me, she held his gaze. Was it because of Marsh, surveillance, monitoring the network's nonprofit operations? He was quiet for 2 seconds. Initially. And then I had a conversation with the woman who founded the organization for 11 minutes near the bar. And she said something that I thought about for considerably longer than 11 minutes afterward. And the donation became both things. Both things, Harper repeated. Both things can be true. I thought you understood that. I do understand it. She looked at her hands. I spent 4 years being built into an asset for a criminal network, and the only person who came to get me in the rain was the man who initially noticed me because I was adjacent to something he was monitoring. She looked up. That's not a simple thing to sit with. No, he said. It's not. I'm not accusing you. I know. I'm just... She stopped. I'm naming it. Because I've spent the last 4 years not naming things, and the habit almost killed me. Damien leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands open rather than folded, which she recognized as a departure from his usual containment and understood as the kind of departure that cost something. I watched you for 4 months because of the network, he said. I learned you were intelligent, principled, and building something genuine inside a structure that was being used against you. I came to get you in the rain because you called and you sounded scared, and that mattered to me in a way that had nothing to do with the network and everything to do with you specifically. Those two things exist in the same timeline, and I can't undo the first one, and I'm not going to pretend the sequence is comfortable. He held her gaze. What I can tell you is that every decision I made after you got in the car was yours. About you, not about the case. Harper sat with this. Outside the window, the city was deepening into evening, and the harbor had gone dark, and she could see a string of lights along the waterfront that made the distance look almost like something peaceful. You came into my room, she said. My professional life, my organization, the framework of everything I'd built and believed in. And you didn't tell me. No. That was wrong. Yes. Say it plainly. I made a decision that removed your ability to make your own decision. That was wrong. He said it without qualification. I've been in situations my whole adult life where information is currency and controlling its flow is survival, and I applied that logic to you when I should have applied something different, and I don't have a justification that isn't also an excuse. Harper was quiet for a long time. The apartment was very still. Okay, she said. Okay. That's not forgiveness. That's acknowledgement. I understand the difference. She looked at him. This man who had come in 17 minutes, who had cut zip ties with a folding knife, who had walked into a federal surveillance van carrying stolen evidence and given it away because the calculation came out the same way twice. This man who operated inside a world she did not inhabit and did not want to inhabit, and who had a lawyer on speed dial and a secondary apartment for continuity situations and knuckles that were scarred in ways that told stories she had not asked for. This man who, when she had been bleeding on the concrete, had held out a coat and not stepped closer, giving her the choice. She did not know what to do with him. She suspected that not knowing was the correct response, and that anyone who told her otherwise at 48 hours out from the worst experience of her life would be wrong. "I need to go home," she said. "Your apartment? I know, I'll stay somewhere else." She looked at him steadily. "Not here." He nodded once. "I'll arrange something secure." "A hotel is fine, a normal hotel." "Harper." "A hotel with a security arrangement I'm not aware of is fine," she amended, "as long as it has room service and a door I can close." Something moved in his face, the ghost of something that was not quite a smile and was more than nothing. Rice arranged the hotel. It was clean and quiet, and the room had a window that looked out over a courtyard rather than the street, which meant the lights were soft and the noise was distant. And when Harper finally lay down on a bed that was not her own and was not Damien's guest room, and was not a sedan or a concrete-walled safe room, she could hear nothing but the ventilation system and the faint, far sound of the city going about its business. She slept for 11 hours. Not straight through. She came up twice in the dark, surfacing hard from dreams she didn't keep, and both times she lay still and breathed and counted and went back under. The second time she surfaced, it was nearly dawn, and through the courtyard window the sky was beginning to differentiate itself from the darkness by degrees, dark blue, becoming lighter blue, becoming the particular thin gray that came just before the first color appeared. She lay there and watched it happen, the sky doing what it did, the city below still quiet, holding its breath before the day started up again. She thought about 27 clients, their names, which she knew, their histories, which she held in a professional confidence so deep it had become structural. The work they'd done in those offices, the incremental and fragile and real work of people rebuilding what had been taken from them, or what they'd lost, or what they'd never had and were constructing from unfamiliar materials. That work was real. It had happened. No amount of fraud underneath it could retroactively hollow it out, because the changes it had made had happened in people's lives, not in financial records, and financial records could be forged, but lived experience could not. She thought about that for a long time. Then she got up. 3 weeks passed. They passed in the way that weeks pass after catastrophic events that turned out not to be final, with paperwork and legal consultations and the specific bureaucratic texture of systems grinding through their processes at their own pace regardless of the emotional urgency of the individuals involved. Kimura filed motions. Vance submitted evidence to the federal prosecutor's office. The renewal project's nonprofit status was formally preserved with a letter from the task force confirming Harper Vale's status as a victim rather than a participant. The letter used that word, victim. She read it twice and then put it in a file and closed the file because the word was accurate and also incomplete, and she was not going to organize her identity around either its accuracy or its incompleteness. Trevor Kane entered a cooperation agreement. He would testify. The agreement took his flight option off the table, which was the correct outcome, and also meant that the man she had been going to marry was going to spend a significant portion of the next several years in rooms with government attorneys going over financial records, followed by a criminal trial, followed by whatever came after that. She did not attend any of it. She did not need to. Elliot Marsh did not cooperate. He retained an attorney who specialized in making federal cases move very slowly, and the case moved very slowly, and Harper chose to leave that particular outcome in Vance's hands, because Vance's hands were the right hands for it, and holding it herself served no purpose she could identify. Celavos cooperated. The cooperation was pragmatic and thorough and entirely self-interested, which was the kind of cooperation that held up under cross-examination because it didn't depend on anyone believing the cooperating party was a good person. The network's operational structure was dismantled over a period of 10 days following the initial filing, with arrests made in 4 states and 2 overseas jurisdictions. Vance called Harper on a Tuesday afternoon to tell her this and said, "I wanted you to hear it from me directly," which Harper thought was the most decent thing a federal detective had said to her in the entire process. And she told Vance that, and Vance said, "Don't tell anyone, it'll ruin my reputation." And Harper laughed for the first time in 3 weeks. The sound of it surprised her. It came from somewhere she hadn't been sure still existed. She started seeing a therapist, a woman named Doctor. Reyes, who worked out of an office on the north side of the city and had the particular quality of presence that good therapists had. Not warmth exactly, which could be performed, but genuine attention, which could not. The sessions were not comfortable. They were not supposed to be. Harper knew this better than most people, and she went back every week regardless. She found a new space for the renewal project. A first-floor unit in a building on the west side of the city, smaller than the old offices, with windows that looked onto a street where a bodega owner pulled back his security gate every morning at 7, and pigeons gathered on the fire escape across the way and did whatever pigeons did. The insurance payment covered the first 6 months of rent and the replacement of the basic equipment. The staff came back. Not all of them. 2 had taken other positions in the weeks the center was closed, and she didn't begrudge them that because people needed income and certainty, and she hadn't been able to provide either during those weeks. But most of them came back. Nadia came back on a Monday morning with a cup of coffee for Harper and a look on her face that covered about 3 weeks of unspoken things, and then said simply, "What do you need me to start on?" And Harper said, "The intake calendar." And they started. The first client walked in on a Wednesday. Harper sat across from her in the new office, which still smelled faintly of fresh paint and didn't yet have the accumulated presence of a space that has been used for important things, and did the work she knew how to do. Listened, asked the right questions, held the silence when silence was the right thing to hold. The woman across from her was 41 and had a story that was specific to her and also familiar in its bones, because human suffering had a grammar, and Harper had spent years learning it well enough to work within it. When the session ended and the woman left, Harper sat alone in the new office for 10 minutes. Just sat. The pigeons on the fire escape across the street reorganized themselves. The bodega owner came out and swept his front step. The ordinary city did its ordinary thing. She was okay. Not recovered. Recovery wasn't a destination. It was a practice, and she knew that better than almost anyone. But she was okay in the solid, weight-bearing way of a structure that has been stressed and has not collapsed. She had the load-bearing elements still intact. Everything else was rebuild. On a Thursday evening, 6 weeks after the night at East Harbor Station, it rained again over Blackwater City. Not the violent rain of that night. A steady, even rain, the kind that fell without drama and committed to its work and asked nothing in return. It beaded on the awning outside the new renewal project offices and ran in thin lines off the edge and pooled in the slight depression at the corner of the step where the concrete had settled over time. Harper was locking the front door when a car pulled up to the curb. Not a convoy, not black SUVs in formation, a single dark sedan, civilian, the kind that disappeared into traffic. The driver stayed in the vehicle. The passenger door opened and Damian Moretti stepped out into the rain, and he stood on the sidewalk in a dark coat with his hands in his pockets and looked at the sign above the door that said The Renewal Project in clean white letters on a navy background. And then he looked at her. He had texted twice in 6 weeks, both times brief, logistical, information about the legal proceedings, names of contacts Kimura had recommended. Both times she had replied briefly. They had not been in the same room since the night she'd left for the hotel. He looked older in some way she couldn't precisely name. Not visibly. His face was the same jaw and eyes and the particular stillness he carried. But something in the quality of his presence had changed, the way a landscape changes after weather that was significant. The underlying geography was the same. The surface showed what had passed over it. She thought she probably looked the same way to him. "You're open," he said, looking at the sign. "Since Monday." He nodded, didn't move closer. Stood in the rain with the water darkening the shoulders of his coat, and let the distance be the distance. "I'm not here to negotiate anything," he said. "I'm not here to offer protection or resources or information or any of the other things I was in a position to offer the last time I saw you." He looked at her directly. "I'm just here." Harper looked at him. The rain came down evenly between them. "No bodyguards," she said. "No. No operational reason. No. You came because you wanted to." "Yes." She stood under the awning with her keys in her hand and looked at the man who had answered a call nobody else had answered and come in 17 minutes and made a calculation twice and arrived at the same answer both times. She looked at him the way you look at something you have spent 6 weeks thinking about carefully from a safe distance, and are now looking at directly, which was different, which gave you different information, some of it more complicated and some of it less. "It's still raining," she said. "I noticed. Do you want to come inside?" He looked at the door, at the new sign, at the light from the window falling on the wet sidewalk. "Yes," he said, "if that's an offer and not a question." "It's both," she said. "Most things are." She unlocked the door. He came out of the rain. The office was warm, and the coffee machine was still on from the afternoon, and the chairs were arranged the way she'd arranged them, and the pigeons were gone from the fire escape across the street because it was dark now, and the window showed the city in the evening, all its lights and its ongoing business, and its indifference and its stubborn, continuing presence. Harper poured 2 cups of coffee, set one on the desk, kept one. She didn't hand it to him directly. She put it down, and he could take it or not. He took it. They stood at the window and drank their coffee and looked at the rain on the city. They didn't say anything for a while. Not because there was nothing to say, but because the things that needed saying were going to take longer than tonight, and neither of them was operating under the impression that tonight needed to be more than what it was. It was a beginning, not a clean one, not a simple one, the kind that had edges and history and required a great deal of the ongoing, unglamorous work of 2 people being honest with each other over a long time. Harper thought about Trevor Kane sitting in some federal holding arrangement with his hands in his lap and the rest of his life recalibrating around consequences. She did not wish him harm. She did not wish him well. She wished him the particular grace that came from being forced to be truthful, which was the hardest kind of grace and the most durable. She thought about Nadia's daughter running to the door. She thought about Marcus Webb's arm healing in a hospital room. She thought about 27 clients and a new office with paint smell and pigeons. She thought about East Harbor Station in the rain, about concrete and blood and a phone at 1%, about the worst night of her life and the specific choice she'd made in it. She didn't regret the choice. Not the call to Damien, not the decision to walk toward the Docklands building, not the conversation with Vance, not the moment she'd handed her statement to Kimura without softening a single fact. None of it. She regretted the 4 years, the version of herself who had been too focused on the outcome to examine the infrastructure, who had trusted the warmth and missed the mechanism underneath, who had believed that a person's behavior in the observable world was a reliable indicator of their behavior everywhere else. She would not make those mistakes again. Not because she'd become harder. She didn't want to be harder, because she'd become clearer. There was a difference, and the difference mattered, and she understood it in a way she hadn't before because you couldn't understand it before. You could only understand it after. Outside, the rain continued to fall on Blackwater City. Not violently, not dramatically. Just rain, doing what rain did, moving through the air without apology, falling on every part of the city equally. The federal field office where case files were being organized into the architecture of a prosecution, the motel on the harbor where a prepaid phone had been left behind in a room that was already rented to someone else, the empty lot where the renewal project's first offices had been, and where the rubble had been cleared and the ground was bare and waiting for whatever came next. It fell on the new office and the navy awning and the step with the depression in the corner where water pooled. And inside the warm window, 2 people stood with coffee going cool in their hands, and the city spread out before them, and neither of them felt the need to fill the silence with anything, because the silence was not empty. It was the sound of 2 people who had been through something true together, standing in the place they'd arrived at, understanding that where they stood was solid, and that what was behind them was behind them, and that what was ahead was not promised to be easy, but was, at minimum, real. The rain kept falling. They stayed.